So thank you for being here. And for those that were here for the last session, I'm excited. I think they're going to line up really well and support each other here. So my name is Casey Peterson. I'm the current Dean of Students on campus and have worked in student affairs here or at Concordia College for the last 25 years. One of my past roles was Director of Student Success Programs on campus here, so focused on academic support, really, and working through that. And so that's what drove a lot of this interest for me. I'm coming at this, I've done a little bit of teaching here, but not a lot. So I come at this more from the perspective of an informed observer or more from the learning side than the teaching side as I'm looking at this topic. And then this is based on my dissertation research, which I finished up. I think I actually defended this week last year. Lisa was on my committee. So so this might be a repeat for you. So
I'm good. I need it again. His dissertation was great, guys. Okay.
So these are my objectives for today, that hopefully you'll be able to do these things by the time we're done. So, and I'm going to go quickly. I had too much coffee, so I'm shaking, but it'll keep me moving. So this is basically about 5 years of study for me in a half hour. So I'll do my best. All right, so implicit theories and mindset. I don't think our speakers are on because there was supposed to be a rattlesnake sound there, right? So these are fundamental unexamined theories that drive our decisions and prime us for our actions. So a rattlesnake sound, for me, growing up in the West, puts me on high alert, right? It changes my direction and my behavior as soon as I hear it. It's something that I was taught very young. So if you grew up around here, you probably wouldn't even notice it, or it might spark your curiosity. You might go looking for it, right? We're going to have different behaviors based on what we believe, kind of subconsciously. And so it's really something that does prime our actions and reactions. It's also somewhat context driven because I know I'm pretty safe here in the Memorial Union, right? In North Dakota. If I hear a rattlesnake sound, I may not jump. I might think it's just your phone, right? A notification or something like that. But it is just there. So, let me go back quick. So the mindset theory is most associated with Carol Dweck, a Stanford researcher, psychologist, and she's been working on it for about 3 decades, really. And her work is really about your mindset about intelligence. So for those, I think most of you probably have this idea, but if you have a fixed mindset about intelligence, you really believe that intelligence is primarily inherited and you get what you get. It's like eye color, you just deal with it, right? It's what you have. If you have a growth mindset about intelligence, you view it more like a muscle. It's something that can be developed with practice, with mistakes, with challenge, right? And so that's really what we're talking about here. If you think about almost all of this research has been done on student mindset. So if you can tweak student mindset from fixed to growth about their own intelligence, you can change the outcomes for those students in your class and long term, right? But if you think about a student who fails their first math test in college, a fixed mindset student says, yep, that's right, there's the proof, I can't. A growth mindset student says, oh, that didn't go well, I didn't prepare correctly. There's something I missed. There's something I need to do differently, right? And so it either sparks some engagement or stops it, right? So in all of this, I started to wonder about, what about you all and your mindset about intelligence? What impact does the instructor's mindset have on the classroom experience, right? So I found, this is the first study, I think, that I could find in the literature that really examined from the instructor point of view. So at the University of Indiana, they assessed the mindset fixed or growth of 150 STEM instructors and then just watched results for 7 semesters, no intervention. And so they had about 15,000 results. So in classes that had an instructor with an assessed fixed mindset, the racial achievement gap was double that of classrooms where with a growth mindset instructor. Right? So they saw that and they didn't say why. And it also, they controlled or they checked the impact of race, sex, the discipline of the instructor. Those things weren't significant, but mindset was. All right. So just like 2 weeks ago, I found that this group actually did another set of studies. There's 4 studies in this article that really bolster what they're seeing there in that first study. So you can see that students who perceived a fixed mindset from the instructor anticipated and experienced these things. And for downstream effects, they saw that it predicted greater dropout intentions, lower class attendance, less class engagement, less end of the semester interest in the discipline, and lower grades, right? So these studies do show that the instructor mindset has a direct impact on student performance, but not how or why it's different for students of color. All right. So here's a quote from that second study. It says, according to the cues hypothesis, people look to situational cues in their local environment to determine what is valued there. And these situational cues can be communicated verbally, in group or one-on-one interactions, and non-verbally by the materials, policies, and practices created by powerful people in a setting. All right, so that's a long statement, but let's think about this for a second. And just shout out for me. Who are the powerful people in the classroom setting? Instructors top, right? Who else might be powerful? Students who speak. Students who speak. Yeah.
LAs and TAs.
LAs and TAs. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you're kind of hitting on the things that I had. Students in particular who have prior knowledge, have a prior relationship with the instructor, right? Or those that fit the classroom environment. Like I can see a student walk across campus and I'm like, oh, you're an engineer, aren't you? Right? A lot of times I'm actually surprised when they say no. But so my study kind of used the materials, policies, and practices. I used the syllabus as a document for analysis, as a record of kind of your thinking. So I assessed instructor mindset using the same assessment that they had used, collected over 200 syllabi, analyzed those samples or some of those samples blind to the mindset assessment, tried to predict that mindset of the instructor, and then did clarifying interviews to really dig into what I was seeing. So what I found is that the syllabi fell into these 2 patterns, right? So syllabus group A and group B, and correlated with fixed and growth. And you didn't see a lot of crossover, right? So somebody that used sticks was also not including the descriptive content. You didn't see these patterns cross. All right. And to explain a little bit of these, operations was really the language that was used, the difference between penalties or incentives to drive action in the class. So you're going to lose points because you didn't do something, or you're going to gain points to do something, right? Are the benefits clear, or am I just going to be punished if I don't do it? Right, there's an easy example is somebody gave an extra 5 points for going to the Center for Writers, right? That was an incentive to get them to engage further. Motivation was really underlying those operational decisions. And it's really about, can you tell, basically, do you believe that you have to motivate students extrinsically? They're only going to do what they need to do? Or do you just fan the flame and encourage what's already there, right? Intrinsic or extrinsic motivation. Power is about that relationship in the classroom. And people with a fixed mindset tended to only use I and you. I will, you will. I'm responsible for, you're responsible for. The growth mindset folks also used we, right? And talked in terms of we. So it's almost a matter of framing the instructor more as the judge of the experience or the guide through the experience, right? And depending on where you start, what mindset you start with, you choose different patterns and different mechanics for the class. All right, and then descriptive context. The last one was that the fixed mindset instructors tended to provide a what and how. Here's what we're going to do in the class. Here's how it's going to happen, how you're going to be graded, all of those things. The growth mindset folks also shared the why. And it was like this revelation. I was sitting at my parents' table in Montana doing the first sample and realizing that there was a whole group of instructors who did not use the word learn in their syllabus outside of the heading learning objectives that's required. And another set that were using it pretty regularly. Right? So these patterns are indicating the choices that they're making. So if you can, at your tables here, thinking about these themes, what examples from your own syllabus or teaching does this make you think of? Right? And the syllabus is not going to make or break a class in this context. This is just a record of, right? And so, and this is also a no judgment zone. Right? So feel free to be honest about where that is. So I'll give you a minute to do that.
Why we use this grading structure.
So we're getting a sense of the different cues that are being sent here, but we still haven't talked about why this would have a disparate impact on that racial achievement gap, right? And when they were talking and studying the racial achievement gap, they were grouping white and Asian students together, and then Black, Hispanic, and Native students together, right? Based on representation in higher ed, I think is what their rationale was there. So yeah, we don't know why this would have such an impact. So I will tell you, I think the racial reckoning, the beginning of that started to help me fill in some literature gaps on this. All right, so stereotype threat. People have a sense of what this is, but I want to dive into it a little bit because I think this is pretty huge. So people generally know stereotypes held about them and their identities, right? So I have become aware in the last 10 years that as a white, male, middle-aged, overweight, bald guy who drives a truck and is an administrator, students are going to look at me and make an assumption that I am a staunch conservative, right? I'm not, but I know that I've realized that that's how they're going to approach me or decide not to approach me, right? And so I'm aware of those stereotypes, right? So take a second again at your table and just share a couple of stereotypes you know about one of your identities. So for those of you that have children or just like animated movies, I know we don't talk about Bruno.
But we do.
Yes, we do.
I think I looked.
Bruno was a student that I had a few years ago who shared a quote with me that's going to stick with me forever, and it really shifted my perspective as a professional. And as a student of color, he said, "We come here knowing that we need to have one foot out the door because we might not be welcome." As somebody that thinks about student transition and orientation and all of that, oh boy, that was a bombshell for me, that not every student was approaching their transition here the same way I did, right? Or in the stereotypical ways I think about it. So these students of color know the general stereotypes about their intelligence, right? And the way that stereotype threat works, so I assume what someone else probably believes about me based on stereotypes about my identity, right? For some people, it's easy to hide identities, some people not, right? Or what happens if I reveal an identity? What are people going to say, do, think? So I start working not to confirm stereotypes about people like me. My cognitive resources get split, so I actually have less energy to focus on the material. And I end up confirming the stereotypes, right? So it's this cycle. I just proved to the professor that X students can't do this work, right? Or are going to be behind. All right, and so this is kind of stereotype threat in a nutshell. So students know that about themselves. They also know the stereotypes about PWIs, so primarily white institutions, right? And so they have that in their mind as well. So PWIs were built by white people, for white people typically, and so there's this assumption that institutional racism is built in to our systems, right? So these students come expecting to experience racism in small and large ways at times. And they're very attuned to those cues for just really basic safety reasons, if you think about Maslow, right? So those two things, what people might be believing about me and what I believe about this place, right, factor into all of this. So again, just a shout out, what are general stereotypes about college classes? So for next year's incoming class, what are they assuming your classes are going to be like? A typical class at NDSU. Lecture. Lots of lectures. Big.
Challenging.
What's that?
Challenging.
Challenging, yep.
Just a number.
Just a number. Class is probably only going to be graded on a few tests. Oh, this class is a weed out class. They're looking to separate the smart from the dumb, right? Before they go into this major. Those, I mean, I remember that in 1991. You know, it's all kind of there. And so students of color come in very alert to different cues that some of those cues mean nothing to white students, right? And different meaning is attached to these different cues. So when you have that different meaning attached, it results in different behaviors and outcomes because those meanings, that implicit theory primes us for our actions and reactions, right? So there's a great podcast included in a course that John offered from Kim Case about racism. And she had a guest on there who started out as an aerospace engineer student, and after a semester was in women and gender studies. It was based on two cues. One of them was she went to orientation and she was the only Black woman there. Not sure. And then the second one was in the first semester, an instructor was handing out tests and reading names and then handing them off. He looked at her, just handed her hers. He knew her name. She stood out. She was different. For me, I would think, oh, that's great. He knows my name. Right? But for her, it was another indication that this wasn't a space where she really fit. Right? Now she did great in women and gender studies. I'm really glad she's there. But it was those little cues that seem innocuous can really have an impact. All right, so you can see, going back to this, that what I found was that these types of cues actually align with what students would consider a typical class that they're expecting to be in, right? They would consider that a stereotypical class would have those elements in it. An atypical class would have more of the carrots and people telling me why and shared power. They're not expecting that, right? So if cues from an instructor seem to endorse that fixed mindset, this is me interpreting the literature and the connections here. So I need more study to prove this, right? But stereotypical classroom means that the instructor likely buys into the systems of the stereotypical PWI, right? They accept that. And the red flags start popping up for students of color, that they're more likely to have to push through racism or discrimination in this class. Right? Cognitive resources get split as they attempt to defy those stereotypes, and they're alert to further cues. They have to be on alert whenever they're doing this class. White students don't see the red flags because this typical system isn't a threat to them, right? They know that even if it is all lecture and 3 tests, and my dad did it, other people do it, I'll be fine. I have to make it through, but I can still be successful. And so this is a key. I want to do a language shift if you haven't made this one yet. So this is really an opportunity gap. It's not about achievement, it's about the opportunity to devote your full cognitive resources to the material at hand and to the class and to learning, right? That's what I think is causing some of this. And so that being atypical seems to bring down the stereotype threat, reduce it or eliminate it. When you're doing stuff that they're not expecting, right? Like active learning in your class and using those, or doing some alternative grading. They're like, oh, this is different. Maybe this doesn't fit with the typical, right? So that's what I was seeing in the literature. So years ago, when NDSU was really doing some work on active learning, some of the assessments showed that yes, it works for everybody. It improves grades for everybody, but it has a disparately positive impact on students of color. Right? And I think that this helps explain why. Those were atypical experiences that shared power, that really brought people together, brought down the stereotype threat. So I believe that that's a piece of it. All right, oh my gosh, I run out of time. So these are some things that I think can help, right? So the first question is really to start with, do I believe student intelligence is fixed or malleable, right? Science has proven that it's malleable. Just go out and look at some brain research, and it's out there. One of my favorite quotes from the back of my kid's baseball shirt is, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. Right? So just take a look at your syllabus. Are your classroom methods and communication stereotypical or atypical? Right? And what you communicate in class, is it stereotypical or atypical? Set high standards and show students how they can meet them. It's important to have the path. And in this research, they talk about wise feedback for students of color, because when you give feedback, if I give feedback as a white guy in control of the class, they may be thinking, why? Why is he giving me that feedback? But if I say, we have high standards in this class, and I believe you can meet them, and that's why I'm giving you this feedback, it takes that piece, that component out. And again, shifts that stereotype threat. All right, and then alternative methods, active learning, learning assistance, flipped classroom. I'm going to point out Jamie. I didn't know she was going to be here, but I was going to use you as an example. We started using talking circles at NDSU, and it's rooted in Indigenous practice as a way to get people to really hear each other. And Jamie was using it in her classroom to create community, to open up room for vulnerability and dialogue. There's some exciting stuff there. So that's what I've got. I was going to do question and discussion since I don't have all the answers. And there's my references. And I will end by saying that I am happy if you want to talk more at all. I'm happy to answer questions now, but I'm also always happy to do coffee downstairs. So.